Hi, this week's topic is power and social processes. So we're talking today about power in society, but you might be wondering what that means exactly, or why it is even important. By way of explanation, I want to take you back to the beginning of the first term, where I told you the story of the collapse of the Society of Easter Island. Of course, one of the most interesting things that emerges from that cautionary tale is the way that the inhabitants of Easter Island committed ecological suicide in full knowledge of the facts, as it were. If you remember, what motivated them was the power of their cultural beliefs, that they had to keep raising these monuments to their ancestors and that their chiefs would take care of things. So there is something very important here about power, namely the power of collective beliefs to override individual intentions or even individual common sense. You can click on the link in the Week 1 module reading for How Networks Shape Our Decisions and Our Lives, a short video by sociologist and physician Nicholas Christakis. I showed you an excerpt from this last term, and its importance lies in clarifying why the influence of collective interests has such a powerful hold over individuals. The key is the way in which social life involves being embedded in social networks that give our lives meaning and structure. Looked at from a different angle, that of the topic of power, we can also see social networks as crucial to an exercise of power over individual choices and actions. As the quotation on this slide indicates, most of us just want to do what everyone else is doing, and that desire to fit into our social network has a strong hold on us. It's not exactly a conspiracy, no one is to blame, but it's pretty powerful all the same. The reason why we aren't in the business of conspiracy theories here is that we are distinguishing between two types of power that we can call formal and informal. By the formal exercise of power, I mean, in a sense, of the relationships of power that we notice. Governments, the criminal code, how Fleming professors evaluate your progress through grades. The informal exercise of power, on the other hand, runs in the background of those things I just mentioned, and is, in a sense, the operating system behind their functioning, but it isn't restricted to those official sites. Instead, it is diffused throughout society. What on earth am I talking about? Simply the immense power of social norms, social networks, and I would add social structures. This is exactly what Christakis has his finger on. Over the next few slides, I'm going to discuss 3 ways through which social collectives exercise power over individuals: norms of solidarity, structures of authority, and bureaucracy. First, norms of solidarity. Of course, we know by now that social relationships follow and are sustained by norms, what we have called the unwritten rules of these interactions. How should we behave in order to keep our relationships going? Especially relationships in which we have an emotional stake. We can refer to norms of solidarity to reference how far individuals will go to protect and nurture their social relationships, the sense of us. We know from the historical record and from current sociological research that ordinary people will do just about anything to maintain loyalty and group morale. The bottom line is that norms of solidarity are a powerful driver of group conformity, whether we are talking about fashion, as in the image on the left, or gang behavior, as shown on the right. Along with group conformity come boundaries between us and them, which are essential, you might say, in combat situations, but which can also result in groupthink, all kinds of extreme beliefs and behavior to protect one's tribe against others. If norms of solidarity involve the exercise of power over individuals, even more far-reaching effects can be observed when individuals are immersed in structures that they see as authoritative. So, structures of authority is the second form of power we are looking at. The image on this slide is from the notorious Milgram experiment that we talked about last term, which was seeking to find out how far people will go to obey or resist orders that are given by someone who seems to have official authority. In the case of the Milgram experiment, the white lab coats, fancy-looking equipment, and the way the experimenters spoke to subjects all combined to create an aura of authority. And within that, an overwhelming proportion of subjects felt inclined to follow the orders. Whether it is because we fear punishment, or breaking rules, or being ridiculed, most of us will do as we are told if the person in charge seems to be in charge. And as a kicker, the more our own actions seem to be separated from consequences, the more likely we are to obey that authority. On a macro level, the ultimate structure of authority in terms of its ability to exercise power over the actions of individuals is the phenomenon of bureaucracy. So this is our third form of power over the individual, and not qualitatively different from the last point about structures of authority, but more highly developed. By the way, the definition of bureaucracy on this slide is from our textbook. Because everyone in a bureaucracy can plead that they are playing their assigned roles in the organization, a lot of power can be exercised without anyone seeming directly responsible for it. You can see how far this can go in looking at the example of the Nazi final solution, which resulted in the deaths of millions, but which was carried out by a lot of individuals simply doing their jobs, whether that was running trains or creating detailed lists of those who were interned. The overall result was a massive atrocity, but it was achieved through a highly efficient bureaucracy populated by a lot of officials obeying their orders. Here we are looking at two photographs of Adolf Eichmann, known as one of the planners and organizers of the Nazi concentration camp system. In the one image on the left, he is in his uniform as a lieutenant colonel in the SS during the Second World War. In the other, on the right, he is a balding, mousy-looking man on trial for war crimes after being captured in 1962. What was remarkable about Eichmann was how utterly unremarkable he was. According to political theorist Hannah Arendt, herself a Jew who had fled Hitler's Germany, Eichmann represented what she called the banality of evil, in a memorable phrase from her book, Eichmann in Jerusalem. During his war crimes trial, Eichmann did not appear to be some kind of Nazi fanatic or evil genius. nor did he seem to feel any guilt for his actions. Instead, he claimed that he had no responsibility for the crimes he was accused of, because he, as a bureaucrat, was simply following orders and doing his job. Psychological testing revealed that he was average in every way. He was what we call a joiner, in that he was always most comfortable within the boundaries and rules of groups and organizations, to the extent that he seemed incapable of thinking for himself. A bit like you and me, actually. Nevertheless, he was executed for war crimes in 1962. Here is a poem about Adolf Eichmann by Canadian poet and musician Leonard Cohen. All there is to know about Adolf Eichmann: eyes, medium; hair, medium; weight, medium; height, medium; distinguishing features, none; number of fingers, 10; number of toes, 10; intelligence, medium. What did you expect? Talons, oversize incisors, green saliva, madness? So this poem underlies the startling potential of bureaucracy to impel average people like Eichmann to do pretty horrendous things, all in the name of doing one's job. Just to wrap up, we've been talking here about power in society, specifically the power of collective beliefs and norms to influence individual motivations and actions. No one likes to hear this from a sociologist, by the way, because we all like to think of ourselves as free agents of our own choice, and in fact, a good deal of our culture tells us that we are. Just think for a moment, though, about how often people willingly do things that will ultimately work against their interests. We're not so different from the original inhabitants of Easter Island, after all. There is good news here, too. In the same way that people can be influenced by the kinds of power relations that we have discussed, they are also quite capable of resisting or subverting power, and they do it all the time. We'll get to that in the second half of the course. Thanks for listening in.